Welcome to the 2025 Youth Service Improvement Grant webinar. I am Simeon, the Program Administrative Assistant at the William T. Grant Foundation, and I oversee the grant lifecycle of the Youth Service Improvement Grants program. So today we're going to be discussing the program, but a few things before we get into it. Just as a reminder, this PowerPoint, this presentation will be recorded. So it'll be posted on the website soon in the upcoming weeks. And we'll also be taking a look at the chat. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can leave those in the chat. And a few other members of the foundation will be monitoring that. So here's a rundown of what the webinar will look like. During today's webinar, we'll go through an overview of the Youth Service Improvement Grant. We'll review eligibility requirements. I'll answer a few questions and then share excerpts from an annotated application. And lastly, we'll have another Q&A at the end. The Youth Service Improvement Grant supports activities to improve the quality of youth services. The goal is to strengthen existing services at your organization. So we're focused on addressing challenges that take place at the point of service. We urge applicants to use their youth service improvement grant application as an opportunity to reflect on what's not going well or any obstacles that you may be facing. Examples of youth service challenges include inadequate curriculum. Maybe there are limitations that negatively affect your participants or anything of the sort. So for deadlines and awards, the YSIG application is currently open. So the link to apply is via the Smart Simple portal. All that information can be found on our website on the YSIG program webpage. If your organization is not already in Smart Simple, you will be prompted to submit your organization's name and tax EIN number for us to manually add on our end. All the information will be there when you're trying to apply. The upcoming deadline is April 2nd at 3 p.m. So it's coming up soon. Awards are $25,000 each and support projects that last a year starting September 1st of the award year. Another unique thing about the Youth Service Improvement Grant is that we provide grantees access to technical assistance and one-on-one support and networking meetings. So if you're awarded the YC grant, you'll be allowed to meet other grantees and kind of work with a consultant on your projects. The foundation aims to award 6 new youth service improvement grants annually. And lastly, the organizations previously funded under either of the youth service grant programs, so this would be the capacity building grant or the service grant, you cannot apply again for at least 18 months after the end of your award. So this is if you're awarded the grant, you would have to wait 18 months after the grant ends. Moving on to eligibility. So in order to be eligible for the Youth Service Improvement Grant, you must be physically located in New York City within the 5 boroughs. If you are fully remote, you must actively provide dedicated services to New York City youth. And this goes for all organizations. At least 80% of the youth participating in the program that you are applying for must be ages 5 to 25 years old. Applicant staff must also have direct contact with youth at the point of service. So continuing on eligibility, there are a few financial requirements as well. Organizations that are eligible for YSIG must have their own 501c3 tax exemption document. And organizations must also have a budget between $250,000 and $5 million in the prior year. So this would be 2024 for 2025 applicants. This is if the organization serves youth only. there is a bit of an extended budget if you do serve other populations besides youth. But regardless, the youth serving budget must be within the $250,000 and the $5 million. You must have audited financial statements or certified financial statements, and applicants or their fiscal sponsors must have a 990. All of the areas to upload these documents would be found on the portal once you're applying, and all of this is also listed on the Youth Service Improvement Grant Application Guide. So the foundation has two major focus areas, which is reducing inequality and the use of research evidence. So we have reducing inequality criteria that grants priority consideration for youth service improvement grant applicants, but this is not at all a requirement. We do fund programs outside of this reducing inequality criteria. So I just want to emphasize that it's not a requirement in order to receive a YSIG grant. But for those who do need it, the three criteria include if you provide youth services for one of the 11 community districts listed on the application guide, you'll be able to see all those districts. Secondly, if you have a program tailored for Mexican descent youth or LGBTQ plus youth. And the last criteria is if you have leaders who are people of color and or members of the LGBTQ plus community, you will be granted priority consideration, but it is not a requirement for applicants. So we received a few questions submitted to us during your webinar registrations, and we've also been monitoring the chat. So I'll be joined shortly by Senior Vice President of Programs, Dr. Kim DuMont, who will share a few of those questions, and I will answer them.
Hi, Maya, and hi, everyone who joined us today. Thanks for taking the time. We love our Youth Service Improvement Grants program. We are very proud to fund about 6 grantees every year, and also to host people at our office so we can learn more about the important work that you're doing. Maya, we have questions that are coming in, some that concern the budget. And I'd like to start there if we can. On either side of the budget, either below 250,000 or above 5 million, will we still consider the application as eligible, or would this not fit in the program, with the program?
So we can't sway from the budget requirements. We do have to comply due to auditors and the eligibility requirements that we do promote. So if you do fall under or above the budget requirements, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible for the service improvement grant. The good thing is that you can keep reapplying, so perhaps your budget would change, then next year you would have the opportunity to apply again.
Thanks for mentioning that, Maya, because one organization is anticipating a budget that will fall within the range, but had a history that fell outside of the range. And so I think I heard you say that your advice is to come back next year. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. And I would like to take the questions about the fiscal sponsors separately and perhaps offline because it's a little trickier. So we'll get back to those through an email about those calls. Another question that we received prior to the webinar as people were registering was about the program's intent to support expansion. So sometimes people are asking, can I expand to a new site? Sometimes people are asking, can I expand the number of young people that I serve? And some people want to expand to just start a new program entirely. What's your response or advice to those folks?
So the Youth Service Improvement Grant wouldn't necessarily support expansion efforts, expansion research, or any capacity building projects. We're also focused on strengthening direct youth services at the point of contact with the youth, as mentioned earlier. So I would either take a look at the Youth Service Capacity Building Grant, which is not open at the moment, but will be in the summertime, or kind of reframe the way that you are proposing your project.
Great. And so if you were going to tell them to reframe it, how would you advise about reframing?
So instead of directly using the YSIG application to explain how you want to expand or maybe reach more youth, maybe there's a way you can integrate something into your services that would indirectly expand your youth and your capacity. So that's a way that I would try to reframe that.
Great. And then another question we have is just about the number of applications that we receive on average each year. And since you're recent with us, if you know it, great. If not, I can take it.
Yeah, so I have some numbers from 2024. In 2024, we had around 40 applications that were started, but only 28 were completed. And of those 28, about 10 were ineligible. And of course, we funded 5 grantees last year.
Great, thank you. So you think that's pretty typical that we receive around 28? I think that's actually right, that we receive between 25 and 35 applications each year. And typically we fund 6.
Yep.
Okay, great. Again, we'll take the questions about fiscal sponsorship offline. Those are a little trickier to answer, but we will follow up with an email. So another question is, how would you advise people about what makes a high quality application? And perhaps that sets you up for the next part of your presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kim. So that's a perfect segue into the second portion of the webinar, where we'll be looking at an annotated application. So the Mercy Center, which is located in the South Bronx, is one of our grantees that were awarded the Service Improvement Grant last year. So we're going to take a look at some excerpts from their application. This is not representative of their full application. I just pulled a few things that may be helpful to highlight. So firstly, here's an example of how your application looks on our end. This is the first page of your application. The summary is usually a paragraph that provides the main ideas and description of your youth service improvement needs. This helps us and reviewers get the gist of the project proposal. Maybe if we have to reference your proposal again, this is a perfect place to just summarize your entire project. Very early on in the application, we asked for a description of youth services targeted for improvement. So here in the Mercy Center's application, the highlighted represents the goal of the proposal, which is to improve their socio-emotional learning approach to their youth programs. They went on to describe their program offerings, so we can see like a summer camp, they have an after-school program, and other enrichment activities. On the left side here, you can see a graphic or a one-pager. It's not a requirement to include this. They added one that captured their participant demographics, which is a part of this question. So the corresponding narrative provided a snapshot of the youth services, and the one-pager just outlined some of the demographics. This is a very interesting way to add to their application. The next section prompts applicants to identify and explain the problem in the program's direct services that you're seeking to improve. Describe how this problem has adversely impacted your program's ability to serve youth and/or enhance youth outcomes. The Mercy Center did exactly that. They discuss how the pandemic and social isolation has negatively affected their participants. At the bottom here, I also highlighted that staff observations, anecdotes, surveys, and feedback are common ways of identifying gaps in services. So these are things that we typically see, and it's something that the Mercy Center included in their application. The next prompt states that given your understanding of the problem and your investigation of its causes, Explain why addressing the problem would address its impact on your program and youth outcomes. So highlighted in yellow, you'll see that the Mercy Center cited sources to support their claim about the impact of socio-emotional programming. So if you don't feel like you have a strong justification for how addressing your problem may impact youth outcomes at your organization, you may consider citing evidence from research or other organizations or maybe even other programs at your organization. This is not a requirement that we have, and we have supported applicants without citing anything, but this particularly helped Mercy Center with this section and help them kind of provide that justification. Lastly, we asked for a detailed timeline for the improvement plan. So the Youth Service Improvement Grant supports one-year projects, so the plan should represent September of the award year through August 31st of the following calendar year. So this is arguably one of the most important aspects of the application, as you can really make a case for your YSIG project plan and give us an idea of what you would be doing within the year. So the Mercy Center did a few notable things in this section. First, they addressed the need for the socio-emotional learning program. This is clear through the types of activities they plan to coordinate during different months, maybe during their different programming, their summer camp. They really folded in the socio-emotional learning programming. They also leverage and built upon all the great things that already exist at their organization. So they have assessment tools that they would use to assess how the socio-emotional learning program is going. They have partners that they've previously worked with that they would also partner with in order to get this curriculum going. They also have a pre-existing curriculum and they have pre-existing activities that would work very well with their socio-emotional learning program. So the YSIG grant is only a one-year award, so it's expected that you could only do so much within a year. So feasibility is very important, and the Mercy Center did a great job of kind of encapsulating all of that. So that's it for the Mercy Center and kind of looking at excerpts from their application. Hopefully that gave you all a better idea of what applications that we're receiving and awarding look like. So what are they? Sorry. So just looking at the key takeaways, what makes a high quality proposal. So just to wrap it up, a clear goal and problem statement, a distinct and justified need statement, relevant details and rationale for the plan, a description of how the improvement plan will be assessed, and the feasibility of a one-year plan are all things that you all should keep in mind. So now we'll open up the webinar for questions again. I'm sure there are many in the chat. And of course, if we can't get to your question or maybe your question is very specific, you can always reach back out to us and we'll be sending out emails as well.
Thanks, Maya. And thanks for sharing the annotated excerpt. Is that something that you plan to make public on our website?
Yes, absolutely.
And is that the only one you're going to make public, or do you have other annotations?
Yeah, I definitely have other annotated applications, and it's something that we can look into doing as we get more applications, as more application cycles take place.
Thank you, Maya. That's really helpful. Please do answer questions in the question box if you have them. One question that we have going back to the eligibility, Maya, is just around whether people can apply to both the youth serving improvement grants and the youth service capacity building grants at the same time.
Yes, so you can apply to both the youth service capacity building and youth service improvement grant. The youth service capacity building grant is not open right now, but we also want to keep in mind that whichever grant is awarded, you wouldn't be awarded the other grant, and that's something that internally we would be able to track.
Great. We also have a question about a grant where the final installment payment was received in 2024. And so I'm going to simplify the question is whether or not they'd be eligible to apply in 2025. I would say that they have to wait till 2026 because it's 18 months, and then we would more than welcome another application. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We also have some questions around the content of some of the substance of what people are proposing and what the board would support. So the first one is people are expanding from in-school to after-school, and they are going to deliver programs there. Would that be suitable for this grant?
So in terms of expanding and capacity building from in-school to after-school, the Youth Service Improvement Grant wouldn't necessarily be able to fund that. If you take a closer look at what the after-school services may be, so maybe there's a new curriculum you want to build out, or maybe you just see another challenge for that direct service, then yes, we could support the after-school program. But we're mostly focused on pre-existing programs and not necessarily building out completely new ones.
Great. Another question is, and this one's kind of tough, which is, are the funds support general operating support?
So no, we don't necessarily fund general operations, whether that's like a financial program or a tracking system. It would have to be directly related to your youth service program at the point of service.
So if people are using it for training staff to be better deliverers of the service, would that fit?
Then yes, absolutely. If it's kind of within that program, definitely, but general operations of the organization, no.
Okay. And if your application is not successful, do you need to wait 18 months to reapply?
No, so if your application is either deemed ineligible or we review it and maybe we went forward in a different direction, you can definitely reapply next year. We've had some reapplicants who have come back and been awarded.
Great. We also have a question about the YSCG, the Youth Service Capacity Building Grant, specifically related to its budgetary restrictions around eligibility. And they're asking whether it's the same. And I believe it's 250,000 to $1 million. So it's focused on the smaller organizations with more limited budgets. And you can have a fiscal sponsor for that as well. But we have an additional restriction around the upper limit. It's a 3-year award, $30,000 in the first year, 20 in the second, about 10,000 in the third, and you're required to get matching funds for the last year. Okay. Another question that we have, we're getting some very specific about the content of the programs, and so some of those we'll need to respond to offline. But somebody's asking the question, if they currently offer dance and they want to add cooking, would that be eligible? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what you think makes a good improvement.
Did you say dance and cooking? Sorry.
Yes, dance and cooking.
Yeah, so we've funded all sorts of different youth service programs, from performance arts, sports. We've had a soccer awardee in the past year. So we can definitely support that as long as you meet the eligibility requirements and you're focused on improving that service, whether it's the cooking program or the dance program, we can absolutely consider that.
Yeah, I think their question was a little bit more like, we do dance now, we want to add cooking.
Okay.
And so what would be the rationale for the improvement?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a tricky one. If your after-school program already exists and perhaps you can somehow frame the additional activities for the youth service as a way to improve the overall after-school program or maybe in-school program, then I think there's a way to to justify the need for that. If it's building out a new program, and that's kind of the idea we get from the application, then you may be deemed ineligible because it's a little bit more of building out and expanding.
Okay, yep. And I'll give an example of a dance program we did fund for an improvement program, which was in the dance program, some of the youth were not feeling recognized, particularly around gender identity, gender expression. And so they reconfigured the protocol for the dance to make all the youth who were participating feel more welcome and comfortable in the sessions. So that was at the point of the service and an improvement without adding individuals. So I think that's a nice example of that too. Another question is, and again, some of these, it's hard to answer on the call, so we will follow up after and respond to the emails that we have. Another question we have is, are we able to support youth stipends that fall under the eligibility? We train our youth advocates and they receive a stipend for providing the services in community.
So no, we don't typically support youth stipends for who are carrying out the youth services, if I'm understanding that correctly. But we support the youth service program itself.
Yeah, so it's hard to see to anticipate what some of these responses are. I think another dimension, Maya, that I'm seeing from these questions is that part of the motivation for the youth service improvement grants is to make a change that's lasting and sustainable. So in the case of the stipends for youth, once our $25,000 is spent and it goes away, it can't be sustained. In the case of the dance program I mentioned, where the curriculum had shifted, it's now baked into the program. No additional resources are needed for it to carry forward, but that improvement can sustain. So that's a way to think about the kinds of requests that you're asking for. Okay, we have a lot of them are coming in, which we really welcome. I encourage people to keep adding them, even if we can't answer them on the call, really around the content or the substance of what they want to propose and whether it fits with the spirit of the youth service improvement grants. We are happy to thoughtfully answer these questions. We do not want you to develop an application and waste your time for something that won't fit. And so we will take time after call to read through them and think about what the appropriate response is. I prefer not to answer those questions on the call and get it wrong. So please keep putting them in. All right, let's see. Other questions that we have. You've talked about the high quality and the components of the program. Oh, another question that we have concerns organizations that have left their brick and mortar buildings and are now completely remote. How do you think about them as delivering services within the criteria and whether they fit as being located in New York City?
Yeah, so if you are a fully remote organization, we've had some organizations reach out about this because they no longer have a brick and mortar physical location in New York City. As long as your youth service programs are directly for New York City youth, we would still deem you eligible for the youth service improvement grant.
Okay, great. For this program, a question is, how are the funds dispersed? And do you know that, or?
Can you take this one, Kim?
Sure. So you're awarded a single payment upon approval of the award and the signed award letter. Typically, we prefer wire transfers, but if that's not possible, we can provide a check. And so that's how that is done. We have another question that Maya, I think you could answer, and it's a really good question, is that a program was funded and they fit the organizational criteria, funding stopped. Could they use funding from the youth service improvement grants to restart the program?
Got you. So the youth service improvement grant wouldn't necessarily be able to revamp a program that previously existed. We would mainly focus on services that are currently being offered and that you can build upon.
Yes, I think that's right. We have several questions now around that, reinstating programs. This is about the improvement of an existing program, as Maya said. Here's another question. We primarily, but don't exclusively serve youth in New York City. However, the majority of the youth we serve are in New York City. Are we still eligible?
You should be eligible. If it is majority, over 80% of youth would fall between 5 and 25. And I guess my question to that person would be like, is it a remote modality or is it something where you exist somewhere else? Because you'd still have to fall into those requirements of being based in New York City. Is it maybe like upstate like youth that you serve? So there are some technicalities around that.
Great. We have another question, and I'm wondering, Maya, if you could back up your slides to show the slide that shows the priority areas, and just talk a little bit more about whether those are required or how they're used in evaluating the proposals.
Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, the reducing inequality criteria is not a requirement specifically for the youth service improvement grant. The William T. Grant Foundation has some other grants that have different criteria regarding this. We do fund programs outside of the criteria and we do fund programs within it. And the three things that we're looking for are listed here regarding community districts, Mexican descent or LGBTQ youth, as well as your leaders being people of color and or members of the LGBTQ plus community.
Great, thank you. We have several questions now about this starting funding. And so I would like to share a resource with people. I'm not endorsing it, but I did meet with this group earlier this week, and they provide bridge funding for nonprofit organizations at a very low cost to help with gaps between, say, a payroll from a city government, and they really welcome, we talked about the Youth Service Improvement Grants program, and they really welcome people to check out the resources that they have, and sometimes they issue grant funding straight out. So that's called Sea Change. It's in New York City. It is intended to serve organizations in New York City and to provide some funding for this bridge funding. And you're all welcome, and you can tell them you were sent from the William T. Grant Foundation. Okay, so this is one that we might need to think about, Maya, but let's see what you say. Are we eligible to apply to support hybrid services, or point of service means in person only?
So we've had different youth service services from what I know. I know some people have hybrid modalities where they maybe have after school programs online and in person. You would still be eligible for the youth service improvement grant as long as the other you meet the other eligibility requirements.
Great. Another question that we're a New York City-based organization serving New York City youth. We would seek funding to improve our New York City-based programming, but we do offer some summer programming outside the city, but we're not asking for any funds for that. Would that be okay?
Yes, absolutely. The eligibility requirements are based around the youth service program itself that you are trying to improve and not necessarily your entire organization.
Okay. Someone has a question about post-award. How do we track progress? And I don't know if you want to take that or you want me to.
Do you know if they're referring to us as the foundation or us as
Us
themselves?
as the foundation, sorry. And how does the
Okay.
foundation track progress?
So there are a few end of post-award reports that we review. We actually have, as part of your application, um, we do ask about how you all plan to track your progress and how you all plan to just keep track and see where you're at. So we kind of just take a look at that and hear about your experience. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, we also work with a consultant who works with the awardees, and we have a few touch points built in there just to kind of speak about challenges. We just recently had a networking call where all the awardees from 2024 could kind of speak and share things that may be helpful in your organization. So those are a few of the ways.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We have another question about, and you're just doing a great job, Maya. Maya, when did you start with the William T. Grant Foundation?
I just hit 4 months at the William T. Grant Foundation.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. How do reviewers assess proposals that leverage multiple funding sources? So would incorporating this grant into a broader funding strategy, such as scaffolding it with existing funds, be a good approach?
Definitely. I think a lot of folks, like I mentioned earlier, leverage things that already exist, maybe partners, programs that have received other funding. I think it's just important to kind of highlight one portion of the overall service that you're trying to approve, so we kind of have a clear understanding as the reviewer of what your goal is and how exactly you plan to achieve it, even if it is within a broader scope.
Great. I might add that when organizations apply to us, they're at different developmental stages. So some, as we see on this call, might be earlier in their journey and closer to the $250,000 limit, still trying to secure funds or intentionally remaining kind of a step outside the mainstream to deliver the kind of services to the community members that they want to. And we really welcome those proposals. Others might be more towards the top of the financial range and have other funds to leverage. And so that can be a strategy that you're using, but it is not a requirement. I don't want to discourage. We have a portfolio that gets made up of organizations that are more towards the higher end and some that are really right near the 250,000. And we really welcome all organizations. What carries a proposal in the review process is the improvement plan. And that's what Maya has annotated in the excerpts and laid out. So thank you for that great question, both about the review process and about post-award. All right. I think we're nearing the ends of the questions. We'll just reiterate again around the financial budget eligibility requirements. It has to be between 250,000 and 5 million. Unfortunately, if it's lower than that, or if it's higher than that, it wouldn't be eligible for consideration. All right, Maya, any other words of wisdom or any final questions for anybody you want to add?
I think there's one question that we received prior to the webinar that I just wanted to address. And someone asked about if we would help schools start and sustain student newspapers. This information is located in the Service Improvement Grant Guide, but I just want to reiterate that we do not fund the schools itself. I know a lot of you all work within schools and have organizations that have programming at schools, but we do not fund public or private schools themselves. But definitely, if you have these programs that your organization carries out at a school, you can do that. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But
And
yeah,
actually, I picked up two more questions, Maya, while you were talking. Do you only fund after-school programs?
no, absolutely not. And it's an example that I probably mentioned a lot because we receive applicants who run after-school programs. But we definitely fund programs outside of that, community-based organizations who host their own youth service programs, and all sorts of things.
Okay, great. Actually, I think I'm going to stop with that one. The other one will take more time.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim, and thank you all for joining the Service Improvement Grant webinar. We are excited to see some of your applications, and like we mentioned, this will be recorded. We will be fielding the questions, getting back to you all, and of course, our email is always open.
Great. Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope to read your applications.